Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Thursday Q&A, 1 o'clock. Again, I can't talk, you see. And I'm here with Tyler, who's from Esse, which I'm sure a lot of you would not understand. What does Esse stand for? ESSE. Tyler.
So it's actually the company owner. The first four letters of his last name are ESSE. So we've been going by Esse, ESSE. Doesn't really matter. But yeah, that's just our trademark logo and the name for the company.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the market stats first. And I hope our Facebook followers are very excited about the stats because they're interesting every week. They change. And we've got Michelle Campbell and Carrie Ann. And Carrie Ann, you'll give the stats. And let's go.
Good afternoon, Facebook Live. So the stats of the last 7 days, we've had 246 new listings, 10 listings back on the market, 148 price decreases, 199 sold listings, 100 canceled listings, and 85 days on market is average, and 1,388,534 is the average list price, and 1,045,998 is the average sale price.
So we're going down. So I think the back on the market situation is more concerning than anything else. And why I'm saying that is because we will actually have a mortgage person on next week or the week after. And the reason we're going to do that is because there are so many changes in the financial market for buyers and sellers to understand. So what I'm going to say is the back on the market is that very reason is that it is not easy getting a mortgage these days. And there's a lot of stipulations. The banks have tightened their reins, and even though house prices are going down, the banks still want to make sure that you qualify. And it's a grueling experience. And unfortunately, you know, for any home buyer, you have to have a lot of clout behind you in regard to financially. So onward and upward, Tyler. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Esse. And Esse, by the way, I've been using for years and years because I'm a huge country property agent who lists and sells country properties. And so Esse is my go-to for inspections for septic and well and anything environmental, even the attic. So Tyler, what is your position at Esse, and tell me some of your background and a little bit about your bio.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been working with Esse for around 2.5 years now. I really came into the company not really knowing a whole lot about on-site septic and well stuff. So they've trained me from the ground up, and I am now going off on my own as a inspector technician, inspecting on-site wastewater treatment systems, drinking water systems at both a residential and commercial level. So we're usually doing those inspections for a real estate transaction of some sort, but there's the odd time where it's more compliance related or it's a permit application. We also do system design for new systems, replacing old failed systems. So it's been quite the experience, and it's been quite eye-opening just seeing all the problems out there firsthand, especially with new homeowners, first-time buyers, especially getting into a situation where they purchase a home without an inspection, and they end up in a situation where they have to replace all this tens of thousands of dollars worth of infrastructure that they're now responsible for. So it's been incredibly eye-opening, but like I said, also very enjoyable and rewarding.
So let's talk about septics first. So in my history, I've had houses that have been built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and even in the 80s. And so the average buyer wants a new septic. Or they don't think that a septic could break down because they have no idea what a septic is all about. And do you find that when you do inspections that the average buyer will enter into a purchase and they have no idea what they're doing?
Yeah, I would say if their real estate agent hasn't got them thinking about that, yeah, they wouldn't really think about that at all. They would just assume that it's fine. A lot of folks, I find, they understand that there's a septic tank out of the house, but they don't really know what happens beyond that. They essentially think that it takes care of itself. It doesn't require maintenance or anything like that, which is certainly not the case. Especially with those older properties, a lot of those septic systems are questionable in both construction and just the deterioration over time just results in a disaster a lot of the time.
Yeah. So, but there are new and exciting systems, and I want to talk about that. And do you know, are you aware of all these new and exciting systems that are out there?
Yeah, so we are with the newer builds and some older homes that have received a new system. There are new systems coming out. We call them advanced treatment units. So what these systems essentially do is it's another tank beyond your septic tank. And inside this second tank, there's aeration involved into that effluent. So what that does is it provides a tertiary treatment, we call it, and it improves the quality of the effluent before it even gets to the leaching field, because ultimately the leaching field is the last step in the treatment process, and then it gets dispersed back into the groundwater table. So if you have a well on the same property, it's very important to have a system that adequately treats that water before it enters the water table. And on top of that, these tertiary treatment units that are built with cutting edge technologies now, they reduce the minimum size footprint required for a septic system.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Have bigger houses on smaller lots and still safely have wastewater treatment.
Yeah. And I understand also there's an alert of when you have to or when you should be emptying it in regard to, or something goes wrong with it. I understand there's a specific alert that you can attach to your technology, if you want to put it that way. Is Absolutely. That true?
Yeah, that is true. So it's sort of system specific. A lot of systems have their own alarm panel as per the company and like the manufacturer of the system that's situated in the home. And that's typically to notify you if there's anything wrong with the system. And there's of course other smaller alarm systems that work through your Wi-Fi. That's the one that you connect to your phone. Those aren't really sold with the systems. They're a separate manufacturer but they can really be retrofitted onto any system. And as for notification for pump outs, so there really isn't any hard, fast way to know whether you need a pump out other than physically opening the septic tank or the trash tank, as sometimes it's referred to. It's the first tank from the home, and measuring that solid accumulation. So when the solid accumulation in the septic tank reaches 30% in volume, that's when you're required to have a pump out as per the Ontario Building Code. So that's the only way you can tell when you need a pump out. And then in order to do that, you have to have a professional. I guess you could do it yourself too, but it's a bit of a messy job. But professional with the tools to do that measurement properly.
Tyler, you can joke on here. It's a little bit of a shitty job, isn't it?
A little, yeah. I mean, on you, you're doing something wrong. I keep.
All right. Well, let's go. I actually want to talk about not the well, but I want to talk about the attic and what you can find in attics of houses that have been built, let's say, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. What can you find in attics?
So there's asbestos. It's known as a carcinogenic compound that was used very popular application for insulation and paneling in older homes and other types of buildings. There's molds and whatnot you can find in attics. To be honest with you, I haven't been exposed to that part of our work here at the company. To be honest with you, I don't know if we still provide that service. We do still have air quality equipment kicking around here, but I haven't heard of us doing
very many inspections. Yeah,
quality evaluations.
Yeah,
you know, it was something we did previously.
Yeah, you did do it previously, and it was very, very handy because you could get everything done in the house that was environmental. The well, the septic, and the asbestos or the mold. Not the testing of the mold, but the actual just checking it out and making sure that it wasn't live.
Yeah.
However, then we'll go on to and that's a very important factor, because when they built those houses in that era, in those decades, what happened is that they would put the bathroom vent right into the attic, and it would go no further. So all your moisture for your bathroom would then go into the attic, thus creating mold. And so that's why. But I think it's becoming less and less because houses are being bought and sold over the time, and all that is all the new infrastructure is being built into the house, like the new fan systems, etc. Okay, so let's go to well, because well is a very important. Now it's funny you talk about wells, because we had a client call us last week, and they bought the house a year ago, and the well, Carrie Ann, you can explain it because you took the call. You're on mute.
On mute. I did let Tyler know off camera, but I will. We had a buyer's agent call us, and their buyer bought the house sight unseen, and she told me that they have not had no water for 2 weeks, and they have been trying to figure out why and what's going on with their system. And they had gotten all the professionals in that they could, from a plumber to a contractor to a architectural person, and I referred them to you guys. Because that's what Karen said go to the source and do an inspection first and then go from there.
Yeah. So what are the reasons they would have that issue? And it's funny because I also have a place in Quebec and in the country, and our neighbors ran into the same problem, and they couldn't figure it out either. So what is the issue that might be occurring in that well? Would you take a guess at that, a stab at it?
I can take a crack at it. So I would have to consult with their receptionist team to see if we have received a call. I haven't heard of anything yet, but if I were to guess, I would say that the pump has possibly failed in the well itself. It is pretty common. They usually only last about 20 to 30 years, the wells, depending on the manufacturer. But they always recommend having a spare pump on hand, just in case. But of course, without visiting the site, having the exact configuration of the system, it's very difficult for me to essentially estimate what is going on there. It does sound like there is some sort of failure down in the well, because you would know if it were further along in the system, such as the pressure tank, or if there is an issue with the plumbing, it would be more cut and clear, right? But if nothing's really blatantly obvious what's going on, then I suspect it's probably something with the well itself.
Is it, and could there be, so it's interesting you said the pump, because I don't think a lot of people realize that you need a pump to pump out the water. It's very cute, because I get that question frequently when I'm showing a country property. Yeah. They'll say, well, so the well water just goes into the house.
There are well, call them wells that have constant pressure to them, but they're very rare. There's only
so the pump is a very important part to the well, because that's how you get
that's your pressure.
So and could a well leak?
So a well leaking, so that could be a punctured line between the well itself and the home. Well shouldn't leak otherwise. Perhaps maybe someone hit the casing. If there is one of those steel casings, if somebody hit it with a snow plow or something of that nature. It's a very odd description, to be honest. I've never heard of it myself, a well casing leaking. Very interesting. I'm very curious to have a look at this site. I do. This client does call in.
We'll make sure that they call you, for sure. And let's talk about E. coli and purification systems. And so selling a property with in the country with the well near the house, but the pasture of cows, grazing cows, is very close by. So when we did the test, when the buyer bought the property, we found that there was E. coli in the water. And we went out, we got it tested. This was going back about 15, 20 years ago. And Tyler, and so what we did is we sent it out for testing, and they gave us and sent it out for a test that was actually more detailed than normal. And so we found out that it was coming from the cattle out in the field, because it was seeping into the ground and down into the well, their manure. Is it manure? No, it's not manure. Is there?
Yeah, I guess I would consider it manure at that point. But yeah, again, that's why wastewater treatment is so important, because you could subject your well to those same conditions. So you have raw sewage on the ground, seeping, it's not getting properly treated, and it's seeping into the water table. So if there were a creek or a wetland nearby, those are often considered groundwater recharge areas. So if coli gets into there, it's going to end up in the aquifer. So like you were saying with the purification systems, extremely important to have on your house, on the system inside your home, following the pressure system, just to safeguard you from any event that would subject your well to E. coli contamination, whether or not you've detected it ever in the past, because there could always be a first, and one day your well water may be fine, and then the next day, following a big rain event, for example, all of a sudden end up with a problem with bacteria in your well, and it can make you extremely ill, especially the young and the old, and the pregnant. It's not good, and it's rather inexpensive, the equipment that's required, especially nowadays, to safeguard you against that. It's not worth the risk.
So do you know the cost of it?
Yeah, so it really depends on the raw parameters of your well. So depending on the water quality, sometimes you require a little more treatment equipment, because the disinfection device, the UV lamp, it requires a certain quality of water. So if your water quality coming out of the well doesn't meet those requirements, you need treatment equipment to get it to those parameters, so that way the UV light can penetrate that water properly and disinfect it. Otherwise, it's doing a subpar job. You may still get a rather good performance from the UV light disinfection unit itself, but if you don't have that proper treatment equipment upstream of that UV light, it's not going to be doing its job.
Right. So so can you recommend a UV system, a treatment system that is of higher quality that would, or you're not allowed to recommend?
I wouldn't recommend a particular brand. They're all pretty comparable. I think the most important thing is knowing what's in your water. So if you got really high hardness, you're definitely going to need a softener. If you have iron or sulfur in the water, you're going to need some sort of oxidation treatment where the water gets oxidized, and then the sulfur and the iron can be removed.
And I think that's quite expensive, Tyler, to do that. I understood that.
It usually runs between, depending on the concentrations in the water, it's usually about $4,000 to $5,000 for a complete setup. Yeah. And that's assuming that you have a well and the pressure system already. But yeah, any other treatment equipment on top of that, usually about $4,000 to $5,000 for an average household, because they're also based on how much water is going to be going through them. Bigger units cost more, of course. So.
It depends how far you want to go with it, as far as size wise, etc. And so in regard to that, a well. So tell us what a well what is the whole process of a well? So I'm building a house, and I need to fulfill all the situations from the conservation and the city, and they want me to put a well in first. Okay, so talk to me about how the whole process goes in regard to that. How do I find water? And does Esse do that for us, or do we have to look at where do I find water?
Yeah, so we are more of a third party inspection service for those drinking water systems. We don't exactly service them or install them or drill wells, for that matter. But we do work pretty closely with other companies who do, and they pass knowledge on to us. So when you're drilling a new well, it's a really risky thing, especially if there hasn't been wells drilled in the area before, because you really don't know at what depth you're going to hit water and what's going to be in that water. So when I talk about iron and sulfur being in the water, that's typically from a drilled well. They're a lot deeper than their dug or bored well counterparts. The dug wells are the big 30 to 36 inch casings, and then the drilled wells are about 6 inches. So there's a huge difference between those two types of wells. Drilled wells tend to be a lot deeper, but they're also more at risk to those contaminants such as sulfur and iron, just because of the depth they go into bedrock. And when you go into bedrock like that, there's all sorts of deposits that have been sitting there for millennia that are all of a sudden released. So without drilling the well and testing the water, you really don't know what you could be dealing with. Change over a short spatial distance. That's why we tend to lean towards dug wells now, especially equipment is so much better now. The recharge rate on dug wells, like the amount of water that they provide, is lower because of the depth being less, but they are less susceptible to things like iron and sulfur. So it's really just disinfection that you're dealing with at that point, rather than treating for amounts of iron or sulfur, which can be very anesthetic to the taste.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's interesting, that because when I owned my country property, I had a drilled well, and then actually I shut off that drilled well because it became it was heavy with iron in it. Yeah. And so I had a cistern put in, Tyler, which was I just felt that it was far better than going through it was a big headache to get. Yeah. So, but it's interesting also that they're turning to dug wells. I haven't heard that for a long time. And so it's safer, I guess. And as you say, it doesn't have the return rate of fulfilling the water as quickly as a drilled well. Is that what you're saying?
It is more susceptible to bacterial contamination for sure, because you got less distance that water's passing through from the surface, because ultimately it's the microbes in the soil, as well as the mechanical filtration of the soil and the bedrock that provides the purification of the water from the grade surface to where your well picks it up from. So dug wells, that is a major disadvantage. They are more susceptible to bacterial contamination. So that's where you have. Yeah. And
so what about artisan wells? I love artisan wells because it's constant water. And it's because I've sold so many farms, I've run into them all the time. And there's the trough for the livestock to drink out of this wonderful flowing water, constant flowing water, right? It's just quite amazing. But you've probably run into them.
Yeah, on a rare occasion. On
a rare occasion, really?
Yeah, I've only encountered two in my time here. And actually one of them was before I started working here. It was at a public drinking water station up north towards Killarney. All around would come to the well, filling bottles, just the cottage country life, right? They don't, a lot of folks wouldn't have a good source of clean water close by. So they take advantage of that constantly flowing well. Another well that I encountered that was artisan, free flowing, was down in Norwich. Of course, it's got a good amount of iron in it, so it's not really the best water.
Yeah. And so if you want to run into two on one property, there's one on Walker's Line and there's 100 acres there and they have two on one property.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's quite amazing. So anything else you can add to, let's say, the consumer? We're not talking commercial, because commercial, we don't do commercial.
Yeah, that's fair.
But we do more residential. But let's talk about residential, and what can you add or suggest to the buyer or seller, because the sellers are also, susceptible to situations. What can you add to enhance a well, or to enhance a septic, or to update it, upgrade it, whatever?
Yeah, I have a couple pointers. So one thing I would strongly suggest is looking into the capacity for a purchaser. Look into the capacity of the septic system there. So a lot of home buyers they'll purchase a property with a septic that's working fine, but then they later on, a couple of years later, they want to do an addition. So that can be a very messy process because, of course, we know a permit is required in most cases for an addition if you're going to be doing it legally. But part of a catch with that permit is you also have to have a satisfactory septic system. Yeah. So if you have a septic system that's sized for the home, and to be honest with you, these septic systems are usually just barely sized for the home as it is, as it was built originally.
Yeah.
They go to do a renovation that is adding bedrooms or bathrooms, or an addition of square footage in general. That's gonna change the theoretical design flow of the home. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the septic too small, and that doesn't fly with the city, and they then require you to either expand the system or replace it altogether, which can, as we know, can be very costly. So that's a very key thing for buyers to be wary of if they're planning on doing anything to the property.
And just as, sorry, not to interrupt, but so when I have a buyer who's buying an older house with an older septic, I always suggest that, even though it's working, I always suggest that they actually put it in their budget when they're purchasing the house to replace that septic.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can get something a lot more efficient, as you mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation, Tyler, and especially if they're going to do a resale on the property in the eventual, at least they have an updated septic tank instead of going through the hassle of renegotiating the offer because they don't, So sorry, I interrupted you, but continue on. Next pointer.
No, well, you hit the head on the nail there. It's these older properties, especially, they were built under an old building code, which has since changed dramatically, just to protect drinking water. So now they require for the conventional systems, they require much larger leaching fields and larger septic tanks. So even if this system was once upon a time adequately sized, it could be 30 years later, it could now be undersized technically. And that new building code would be applied if you were doing any major renovation on the property. If you're, it would get grandfathered in, of course, whether that's right or not.
But it's still not really as efficient and functional. Absolutely. As And I mean, I know that a good septic would cost you anywhere from 20 to 30 or maybe even 35,000 because prices have gone up.
Yeah.
So in the end result, that 35,000 is really doesn't, it does matter, but it doesn't matter in the end result because you've got a more efficient system and less maintenance on it.
Yeah, so, and we've been facilitating design and the installation of new septic systems in some cases. We don't do it very often. It's kind of like a new expanding branch of the company. But yeah, a lot of these systems are going well over what you were saying. Even for an average house, 300 square feet or 3,000 square feet, sorry, roughly $60,000 to $80,000 now.
Oh my gosh.
Just because of the price of aggregate, price of materials, labor has gone up.
Well, I was talking before COVID, okay?
Yeah, everybody's so you can't get a contractor. So whatever you get is what you get.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a tough world.
One. Yeah. Anything else you can add?
Yeah, so I really want to stress this for new rural homeowners, or maybe seasoned rural homeowners. Regardless of the type of system you have, you should always have access at grade, easy access, like a couple screws for your septic system. I can't stress that enough. If there were ever anything wrong with your septic, whether there was backing up or overflowing out of the lids, or you just wanted to check on things, it's very important to have that quick, easy access. It just makes it all that much easier for everybody, both the homeowner and the service company. I really can't stress that enough. Having
and it's very true. It's very true.
Yeah.
Very true. Gone through a few of those, Tyler.
Yeah. For a big septic tank at a real estate inspection.
Well, it's if you have to dig for it, it's just so disruptive for everybody, and it takes a lot more time. And so it's very disruptive. All right. Anything else? And Michelle and Carrie Ann, do you have any questions?
I did actually have a question for you, Tyler. What do you suggest? Like, what advice do you give for buyers who are looking to buy a rural property in the winter time? Because I know like the ground is so frozen on it's just, I'm sure it's harder to access those, the septic and well and things like that. So like, is there some advice that you would give buyers who are looking to buy in winter?
Yeah, for sure. So inspections in the winter, they're definitely a little tougher. Again, stressing that access at grade, it ties in with my point beautifully, your question. Having that easy access at grade makes it all that much easier in the winter. But usually if the home is being lived in at the time of the inspection, the radiating heat from the tank itself, from that hot water going in there, usually keeps the ground rather soft in the area of the septic tank that we need to dig up. And it actually can help us find where the components are. So it does actually sometimes provide a clue as to where the system is, because there'll be an area where the snow is all of a sudden thinner on the it can also point out issues with the leaching field as well, but I won't get into that. As for the well side of things, the winter doesn't affect our inspection service too much. It doesn't really affect too much. One other thing I would say about septic in the winter is septic systems, they really slow down in the winter up here in Canada. Down south, obviously that's not much of an issue, but so if you're doing an inspection in the winter, you're seeing the system at its worst time of the year. That's the time of year we're struggling the most. So deficiencies are going to be more evident in the winter time.
Right.
So Esse did, my phone is going, sorry. Esse did do an inspection, and they did during the winter, and the snow was way high on Cedar Springs Road. And it was cute because what they did insist on my owner shoveling out the area around where the access was. So my owner did that. He shoveled out the whole area. And
that's really,
yeah. So that's what it was a great help for you guys. So
yeah, some different than others, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to thank you very much, Tyler, for being on our panel. And any other questions from either one of you, Michelle, Carrie Ann?
No, thank you so much.
If we do have questions, we'll just email you and put out those questions for you. But thank you very, very much for coming on our panel, and we loved gaining all this information. And I always learn things by doing this because there's always something new and exciting happening out there with any kind of situation for a house, whether it's a septic or a well or whatever. But thank you again, Tyler, for coming on.
My pleasure.
And thank you, Facebook followers, for coming on and chiming in. And we, as you know, we are the largest company in the world globally. We have over 200,000 agents now in the world. So there you go. We're just growing like never believe. And I love selling properties over in Portugal or wherever you want me to sell you a property. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Have a great week, everybody. And you, Tyler, also.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.